Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined right now by WrestleNomics' own Brandon Thruston, who has popped in today. Nice to see you, Brandon. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Yes, thanks, Warren. I'm really glad to be here and talk with you voice to voice.
Yeah, because we do trade a lot of text messaging, and I think it's a very auspicious occasion, right? I think as far as this being our first time actually speaking to each other, we couldn't have picked a better moment, right? Big announcement that happened this week on AEW Dynamite. The rumored AEW New Japan show is indeed happening. They're calling it Forbidden Door. It's happening at the United Center on June 26th. And you know what, Brandon? It is a perfectly logical next step in the strategy of non-growth of AEW, right? Just doing things exclusively to please their fans, not going after, casuals, so on and so forth.
I actually, we had to arrange this interview at a certain time because I just got home from my work as a high-rise construction worker with my fellow Johnny Lunch Pails, and we were the discussion around the lunch pail was just how uninterested everyone is in this announcement, in this news that AEW is going to be working with New Japan in the Forbidden Door pay-per-view coming up in June. What we all really agree as we smoked our cigarettes, we all really agreed that we would prefer it if maybe AEW had like a tall guys tournament or something like that.
Sure.
So, just something like that just stops catering to wrestling fans who like wrestling. That really pisses us off. We would like things to be dumb, and we would have liked the Attitude Era back, quite frankly.
Sure, yeah. All that kind of stuff.
A little bit sick of all this new talent that keeps coming in. It's just a bunch of WWE guys anyway.
Yeah, so exactly. It's all a bunch of WWE guys, and all guys that we weren't interested in the first place, right? That's the thing.
No. Only fans who were already interested in AEW would be interested in that.
Absolutely. But all joking aside, it is interesting though that this happened on a week where you tweeted out data regarding AEW's growth, in certain key performance indicators, right? Look, if you were to give us a summary of it, what did your data bring up?
I'm gonna have to look at it. I just had Jason Umperser write an article about it. I just the announcement was coming up. I think it was yesterday, Wednesday.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people expected, including myself, that it was going to be a New Japan announcement, and people were bracing themselves for the response of some people. That was the response following the announcement that they're going to work with New Japan. But basically, and I know a lot of people, well-known people, have said that AEW is not really growing, and in light of the merger between Discovery and Warner Media, they're going to have to go to their new bosses or their new partners and say, explain why AEW isn't growing, and but it is growing year over year in, let's see, total viewership. This is in Q1, so Q1 just ended on March 31st.
Right. Total
viewership is up 29% year over year. The demo is up 28% year over year.
Which is huge.
All their pay-per-views are up year over year so far. That's probably going to end with All Out. But all their pay-per-views are up. In Q1, their YouTube views were up. In Q1, web search worldwide was up. In the United States, it was up. Rampage viewership has... on the other hand, Rampage viewership has shown some weakening in the last few months.
A little struggle.
We don't have year over year. I guess I could have reached back into 2019, like pre-pandemic ticket sales, and compared that to WrestleTix. Come July, we'll have that year over year comparison. But and you could say, well, the TV ratings, those are still being compared to the time when they weren't going against. Those are being compared when they were going against NXT. Mm-hmm. They're not going against NXT now. Half of April is overlapping with that post Wednesday Night War era.
Okay.
At the moment, as of the rating that just came out, they're still up year over year for April. So AEW is doing okay, and you can look at NXT on the other hand, and NXT I think as a brand has really diminished in interest among wrestling fans. You can see that in the ratings, if nothing else. But no, AEW seems to be doing well, growing fans and growing popularity, growing in probably in their revenue. There's more pay-per-view revenue when you sell pay-per-views.
Sure.
In terms of revenue in general, probably the biggest part is that they're in another year of TV rights fees, and those are probably guaranteed to increase over time.
Right.
Are they profitable though?
Well, that's a very interesting question, right? A former promoter earlier a few days ago came out and guesstimated the price, right, of what an AEW production might seem on a week per week basis. I think he evaluated it just like $450,000 a week, I think was his ballpark. If that's what
that's a little low. I think that's a little low.
You think it's a little low per
yeah, I think
that doesn't include talent. Like he wasn't including talent on top of that. It was strictly operational.
Yeah, I would go $500,000, maybe a touch over that. I'm sure it varies from week to week and from venue to venue, but in the range of $500,000, about $500,000.
Yeah,
probably a little more than that. And I think WWE spends maybe almost $1 million, and certainly on a premium live event, probably over $1 million. And AEW on a pay-per-view or some sort of big event, a little bit more than what they usually would. But yeah, over $500,000. I think AEW is losing money, especially considering what Tony Khan said to Forbes about his video game investment of 8 figures. So it's at least a $10 million investment that he's made in apparently the gaming companies that are working with AEW is my assumption there. So he said if not for that, they would be profitable. This is a promoter promoting though. I don't know, but the game is all. They're probably losing money. They are considering that investment. Losing money, but that's, you invest all this money and maybe they get a TV rights upgrade come a year or two from now. That's 3 or maybe 4 times higher than what they have now, and then they do become quite profitable.
Right, because it's not unusual to see companies to do that, right? Go in, I think the term loss leader isn't necessarily the right term here, but operate as a loss in a couple of years. Because basically, I think you answered a question that I had was like, do you feel like that AEW is indeed being a little risky in what they're doing, expecting better rights fees when it's time to sit down at the negotiation table?
Do I think they're
being
expecting?
Yeah, that they're making these big costly moves, operating at a loss.
Yeah.
Expecting down the line to have a bigger rights deal that might compensate.
I think they'll be fine if they get their TV rights fees tripled, and I can make an argument that maybe they should get it more than tripled if you just look at what WWE's getting, and let's assume that WWE gets a favorable upgrade too of like 1.5 times what they're getting. If you compare the viewership, yes, WWE's viewership is larger, even in the demo. Yes, Raw and SmackDown are outpacing Dynamite, but not to the degree that there's a difference in price there, right? Sure. I have a chart somewhere. It's they're producing something like 19% of the total viewership, the whole total watch time between WWE and AEW. They're producing something like a quarter of the demo viewership between WWE and AEW, but they're getting like 9% of the money between WWE and AEW. So you can make an argument, well, they're like 3 times underpaid. And let's assume WWE, their rights deals come up around the same time. Let's assume WWE gets a 1.5 upgrade. So I'm saying 3 times. We'll really multiply that by 1.5 times. And what is that, like 5 times or something like that?
Well, I'll trust your math, I'll tell you. Before I trust any of mine, I'll trust yours.
It's like 4.5, something like that.
Let's round it up 5. You were right, Brandon.
Yeah, because half of 3 is 1.5. 3 plus 1.5 would be 4.5. Anyway, you can make an argument just on viewership, and that won't be the only factor. Ad rates will be a factor. How much they believe that they can drive viewership to other programming. They're going to have a track record there, and you can understand why, in the first place, AEW would be so perceptibly underpaid because they were an unknown quantity.
Sure,
even in
course.
January 2020, they weren't. They only had a 3-month track record behind them at that point when they got this deal
Current
redone
deal,
from
yeah.
what they had in the first place. So, but they have a lot more of a track record now, and in the grand scheme of wrestling, you can argue that they're here to stay. And if anything, they're getting more comparable in popularity to WWE. Now, WWE, before people come out, WWE's towering over them in a lot of ways.
Sure.
But that margin has gotten smaller over time.
Because this is something that I see quite a bit as well. It's like, you know, how instantly these WWE comparisons happen. It's like, oh well, you know, people expect AEW to be on the same level as WWE, but do we really, Brandon? Like it, I don't want to sound, you know, but look, I'll just go ahead and say it. Does anyone with a brain really come here and say, I instantly expected AEW to be operating on the same level as WWE? Like doesn't it seem a little far-fetched?
It's the conversation that I think you're talking about. It's a very tribal conversation between people who, you know, I think kind of what WrestleNomics is doing sometimes is I'm operating the scoreboard or I'm being the referee, and people always think the referee's doing a bad job when
Sure.
their team's
That's a great
not
comparison.
winning, or when their teams look, the W team is way ahead, but their lead is diminishing, and then they're still way ahead, but it's getting closer. And if you're rooting for Team WWE here, you know, that might make you feel insecure, like there's a threat out there, you know. But there's, I think I've put it like, you know, and I think a lot of people on the AEW side view this as like, they do view this as they're fighting for wrestling to be better, and a lot of people who worked in WWE were wrestlers, were creatively dissatisfied with what they were given,
Sure.
or they were allowed to do in WWE, and have come over to AEW and probably feel a lot more satisfied. Not that AEW is perfect. You know, we've seen people come out of AEW not so happy, including in some ways Big Swole, right? And that was a big thing to do. But in a lot of ways, I think for some people, this is kind of, and I guess I'm speaking about people on the AEW side who are rooting for AEW to win here and to do better ratings and things like that. This is like a fight for wrestling's soul, for among people who feel like WWE has been terrible for a lot of the last 20 years, especially the last 5 years or so. It's gotten progressively worse, and by God, the people, we love wrestling. I'm exposing myself as maybe having some sympathy to this point of view. We love wrestling. We just wish it was better. And the most visible and the most influential version of wrestling doesn't even want to accept that it's wrestling. Doesn't even want to accept that what they're doing is pro wrestling. They want to language it as something else, and it's presented on television in a way that a lot of people, maybe me, find unwatchable. But the medium, the art, wrestling is great, can be great.
Sure.
But it's being wasted, and a lot of this talent is and has been wasted for, you could argue about how long.
Yeah.
So that's what's behind a lot of, and then obviously there's people who feel totally different on the opposite end, that they love WWE for Lord knows what reason, and they want to see it succeed, and this AEW new kid on the block is just annoying, and it's run by this rich kid who's overspending all this money, and, you know, he's just taking all these WWE people. That's all he's doing. He's not doing anything that's meaningful.
Sure. No, okay. It kind of draws the picture there. I completely get it. Sometimes the tribalism is a little tiresome. Let's put it that way. You know, it really gets to you. But look, coming back to the AEW New Japan situation, right? Are we taking a little, you know, with the growth and all of that? Oh, we're not getting, you know, the business isn't growing. AEW's not getting new fans. Are we taking a little bit too much of a North American centric view in this? Because clearly AEW has its eyes set on New Japan, wants to get, on Japan, right? The country, not necessarily the promotion. But it clearly has a vision to get in there because of Obviously the deal that they have with New Japan, for the show, for adding their shows on New Japan World, plus getting commentary from Shingo Takagi on top of that. Like, there's certain level of seriousness in regards to that. The relationship that they're developing with DDT. Like, are we just looking too much into our own little sphere here, in our North American sphere? Because, or is the growth opportunity in Japan plausible for AEW, in your thought?
In Japan itself, I don't see Japan as this big market that AEW can capitalize on. It doesn't hurt. I mean, I guess they can run shows. I mean, WWE's run shows there, certainly. They ran at the Sumo Hall a number of times in recent years. It's not inconceivable that they could do some house shows, some international house shows there that could draw a crowd that makes it worth it. But it's not like but the live events are super secondary in this modern wrestling business. What really makes your money is your TV, is selling your TV to distributors. And W just lost their TV deal in Japan.
That's true.
They're being distributed on DAZN. I think they still have like their 30-minute This Week in WWE is on Samurai TV, which has, I think, a pretty limited subscribership. I don't know a lot about Japan TV other than cable TV isn't in Japan what it is here. And on top of that, there's no TV market in the world that is like the U.S. TV market in terms of being as lucrative as the U.S. TV market is.
That's fair. Okay.
So I don't know. I think it's good for them to maybe secondarily become more of a global brand and have some cooperation with New Japan. But there's all sorts of reasons why it would be good for them in terms of putting on shows that will probably do very well at the gate, pay-per-views that will probably sell pretty well. And just getting more money out of individual fans. I guess one of the issues on the subject that you're getting at is that, are they really attracting any more fans? Because the people who know about AEW, AEW is a bigger deal than New Japan is. So what's working with New Japan going to do? Well, it's going to get more money. Even let's accept that they're not going to make any more new fans because of this, or they're not going to get any customers in that weren't already in. Being a customer of a wrestling company is not a binary either are or you aren't. It's you're either spending a lot of time, a little bit of time, a ton of time, or no time. There's a great spectrum across which one is a wrestling fan in terms of how much time they spend, in terms of how much money they spend. And if you're doing something that feels really compelling, people are going to spend more time and more money on your product. And let's accept that. No new people, no additional reach, but you still are going to extract more time for your partners and more money for yourself out of this.
So are you saying that it's a good idea to cater to your fans, to make your fans happy? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I think as a person who's studied wrestling history, no, you shouldn't do that. The fans have always been the problem here. They boo when they should cheer. They cheer when they should boo. They don't sit back and enjoy. They go on the internet and bitch and complain about it. So the fans have always been the issue. That and the wrestlers have been the real challenges that wrestling companies have had to face, unfortunately.
It's the wrestlers and their attitudes and that weird.
Yes. There's
just some good stuff here, some insightful stuff to just at least to help us wrap our head a bit more around what's going on and interesting. But I will say, just as we close up, and maybe you can drop a thought here as well. I still think it's interesting, AEW trying to make inroads into Japan nonetheless. I myself have a better understand, at least a more, I feel a little more grounded observation when it comes to Japan, where it's not necessarily this land of plenty, because there's a lot of factors that maybe we don't quite understand, and how cable TV is set up and so on and so forth. It's not the same thing as here. But I think it's still interesting that we're trying to make inroads here, whereas I always felt like this Shangri-La of, new wrestling markets has always been India, but no one's cracked the code, right? Do you?
Well, it is the number 2 TV market for WWE. They're getting a lot of money from India. That's their number 2 TV market. They're getting $50 million a year. Compare that to like $470 million that they're getting in the U.S. for Raw and SmackDown. But they're getting a lot because that population is so big.
Right.
The median income in India is pretty low relative to the U.S. or Canada, but it's so many people, over 1 billion people, that on that scale they can extract a pretty good amount of money out of it. And AEW has a deal in India with Eurosport, which is owned by Discovery, conspicuously owned by Discovery. And Satnam Singh is.
Oh well, look.
I don't know.
He'll definitely carry the brand. He'll carry the brand.
Samoa Joe might have to work hard, but yeah, we'll see.
Look, Joe's dealt with worse. He really has. But listen, Brandon, I really appreciate the time that you took to come and chat about the business aspect of all of this, and also for being the first guest on the Mr. Warren Hayes show to be wearing a collar. So I really appreciate that. Do you want to drop your plugs before we head on out?
Sure. You can follow me and reply to me on Twitter. I won't read it, at Brandon Thruston and at Wrestlenomics. Go to Wrestlenomics.com. There's a new article today, actually, about the subjects that we're talking about here, the AEW's business. And on Patreon, I have been writing and reporting TV ratings, including the quarter hours lately, for WAW Impact New Japan. That's nearly every day. There's a TV ratings report at patreon.com/WrestleNomics.
And as a proud supporter of WrestleNomics, I will tell you all right now, it is the best money you can put in any Patreon out there. You'll get your money's worth if you're into, the more rational side of wrestling discussion. Let's put it that way. Brandon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, man. Let's do this again soon.
For sure.